Welcome. Oh, that is nice and poppy. Welcome, everyone. It's 7:15 almost. We're going to get started. And this program is entitled You the Vote. Philippa said that I was running this program, and that is not the case. I'm just kicking it off. I'm going to start by lighting a chalice and doing a little introduction. And then I actually will have to go to another program in a little bit to bless the seeds. What a great job for a minister, right? I get to bless the seeds that are going to be put in the garden. So I'm going to begin by just lighting the chalice with the words that maybe you'll know by heart, but they are the ones that we're saying at the end of the service. We light this chalice for the light of truth, the warmth of community, and the fire of commitment. And it's that fire of commitment that we are really about this evening. We are indeed a justice-seeking people. And in fact, one of our ends are for Unity Church is discover and pursue our individual and collective work to advance justice, wholeness, and equity for people, our earth, and all life on it. We also are a church that is founded on democratic process. Witness what we experienced during the candidating week, where you all voted to affirm your next senior settled minister. But we also know that our democratic process is intimately tied with the values that we share. And I know I don't need to tell you all this of how incredibly important this year's election is. And so when we started talking about a program, I was really excited to know that MUUSJA, which stands for Minnesota Unitarian Universalist Social Justice Alliance, did I get it right? Right. Is actively involved in You the Vote. I had experience with You the Vote in All Souls, Washington, D.C. when I served there for 2 years as their interim senior minister. And I got to watch not only democracy in action, but the power of the people to make a difference in another crucial election. So tonight, you're going to hear a little bit about MUUSJA and a little bit about, probably a lot more about You the Vote and how we can together make a difference in this most significant election. And to do so, I want to introduce Karen Wills, our democracy strategist and also former executive, right? Director of MUUSJA. Welcome, Karen. Thank you.
Oh, that's right. We have an abundance of microphones. Thank you so much. It is such a treat to be here, and it's such a treat to be talking about You the Vote this year, in particular, when things are feeling rather, maybe a tad polarized, maybe a tad fraught. And so we are going to take a look at a program that is happening not only across Minnesota, but across the country. And one slide that I meant to make and don't have, I'm actually going to start with, and that is just to say that we so far are doing You the Vote in Minnesota in Bemidji, Bloomington, Northwoods, that's Pequot Lakes, Duluth, Eagan, Excelsior, Moorhead, Fridley, Grand Rapids, Hanska, Mankato, Minnetonka, Minneapolis ×2, Northfield, Rochester, St. Paul ×2, St. Cloud, Underwood, Virginia, White Bear, Wilmer, and Winona. All right. So we are part of a big thing right here in our little state, right? Let me tell you what we're part of. I think just to sort of get us started, if we could have a video for 2 minutes. This just sets the mood.
1, 2, 3.
Technology is wonderful when it works. Okay, and sometimes it doesn't. And I am not a song leader, but one of the songs that I hope that your talented song leaders will sort of attach to at some point and share with you is this wonderful tune that Elizabeth Alexander set to music. She took the chant, "This is what democracy looks like," and made it into a tune. Really lovely when it works. So we will move along from that. That's, this is our little experiment in technology. Okay, so MUUSJA is the Minnesota UU Social Justice Alliance, and we are facilitating all the congregations that I just named to do UU the Vote in Minnesota this year, as we did in 2022, and as we did in 2020. And we have been learning year by year sort of how to make this work and how to maximize our impact and and sort of maximize our limited staff and our incredible board. And I have to mention Reverend Terry Bernor, who's sitting here in this beautiful pink shirt, is one of the members of our MUUSJA board. And sitting next to her, Sherry Knuth, is a former member of our MUUSJA board, former chair of our MUUSJA board. So MUUSJA is well represented here. And forgive me if any of you that I don't know may have done it before my time, and I don't mean to leave you out. So wave if you did. Our UU values and principles involved in UU the Vote are many, including the commitment to the democratic process, the commitment to inherent worth, the idea that every person, every citizen has one vote. The interdependent web of all of us, the fact that my life and yours is hanging on the votes of 200 people in, say, Hastings, Afton, and Cottage Grove, for example, right? That we have so many decisions about our lives that are hanging on one vote in the Minnesota Senate and 5 in the Minnesota House. We are interdependent in every relationship way with one another, and we are absolutely interdependent in a representative democracy. The 8th principle that many of our congregations have adopted, liberation from racism and other oppressions, is a guiding principle for UU the Vote nationally and for us in Minnesota. We're looking at the state with, woot woot, the highest voter turnout in the country. We are #1 year after year after year, and we will be again. But we are also the state with the biggest disparities in turnout between white people and Black people, and between people who are currently able-bodied and people who are currently living with disabilities. We have one of the worst turnouts of people with disabilities. So yeah, so there's work to do and outreach to do. Generosity is one of our new values in Article 2. And that sense of generosity, that my own self-interest leads me to be generous with my time and my treasure, because my liberation is bound up inextricably with that of other people. So we cannot be complacent, and you're all here, so I know you're not. If you're living in a district where it seems like things are kind of pretty much going your way, or if you're in a demographic where that's the case, we still need to be able to, kind of be a community. MUUSJA, for those who may not be familiar with it, I brought some copies of our 2022 annual report. You can kind of take a look at that if you want to learn more about MUUSJA and all the different stuff that we do. We don't have one for 2023 quite yet, but because we went through a leadership change then, and you all are very familiar with how that can be, kind of a shakeup for you. But we have fantastic new leadership in this past year. Katie Klein, who's worked with MUUSJA for 4 years now, is currently the executive director. And I am the democracy strategist. We also have a couple of part-time people who are working on all kinds of things, Leslie Mills, Reverend Leslie Mills, and Dallas Johnson, who are doing amazing work. But what MUUSJA is one of 27 state action networks that are part of a UUA coalition of networks in each state that connect the environmental and social justice teams of all the congregations in those states. And in Minnesota, we currently have 25 active UU congregations. And MUUSJA, with its tiny staff, connects all those 25 congregations, connects the congregations with the UUA national groups, such as UU The Vote and UUSC and other UUA bodies. We are connected with multi-faith allies like Isaiah, Jewish Community Action, CARE Minnesota, and others. And we are connected with community allies in this context that are specifically doing pro-democracy work, like the League of Women Voters, Minnesota Voice, We Choose Us Minnesota. We're part of those coalitions. So we are weavers and connectors and resource people who are tying together the efforts of the congregational teams that work on stuff like reproductive rights, gun safety, taking care of refugees, taking care of school children, and doing democracy in all of those contexts. These are a few of the partners that we have right now. We are working very closely with a major coalition of about 4 dozen organizations called We Choose Us that includes Isaiah, the League of Women Voters, Gopal, and Minnesota Voice. We think about doing politics in church as a bizarre thing, I think. I've had a lot of people really raise an eyebrow, like, what? Are you telling people how to vote? We are not telling anyone who they should vote for. We are telling people how to vote in the sense that we're telling people that your beliefs and your values and your faith guide your choices. And that when you vote in a representative democracy like ours, we want to be voting to create an inclusive, multiracial, multicultural democracy that helps us pick people who are going to make good, wise choices, thoughtful choices about how we share our stuff and how we invest in stuff for the future and how we all get along, what's allowed, what's required, and what's prohibited in our community of communities. We think about democracy not being just voting. I've been spending many, many weeks now as MUUSJA's democracy strategist talking to and kind of bugging the people that I voted for, to try to get them to support the North Star Act, which would protect immigrants in our state from the kind of racial profiling that's happening in Iowa and Tennessee and Texas, right? I'll put in a plug right now. Any of y'all who live in Senator Erin Murphy's district, actually all of you, I don't care, send Senator Erin Murphy a little note and say, I stand with immigrants, I side with immigrants, I care about newer immigrants to Minnesota who are good neighbors and essential workers. And I do not want us to look like Iowa. I do not want us going after people. I want to have a separation between the work of the federal immigration agents and our local schools and clinics and police who need to not be profiling and reporting those people, right? So we do this kind of work with MUUSJA to hold our elected people accountable. The voting and the election is only part of it. What we don't do ever as a coalition that is a nonprofit, 501c3 nonprofit, MUUSJA, donate to MUUSJA, it's tax deductible, it's all good. But what we don't do is to endorse, discuss, volunteer, or donate for any candidate, political party, or political action committee as a congregation. can you buzz with your best friend during coffee hour about, who the candidate is that's running for the open seat in your district and who you're supporting personally? You bet you can, right? That's your personal individual conversation. But can the church put that in their newsletter and say, we want everybody to vote for Susie Q? Nope, that's actually illegal. And that's true for MUUSJA as well. So one of the things that I really want to underscore is, as we're talking about the postcarding or the letter writing projects, the things that we're bringing forward at church, it is absolutely essential to not write ever on any of those things. We have to stop candidate X, from taking over the country, kind of thing. We can't do that. So what we can do, and what the UUA, UU the Vote national kind of organizers are doing, is they've created this program called the Good Trouble Congregations. And to become a Good Trouble congregation, there's certain things that you have to do. Now, I was a Girl Scout leader for 9 years, right? So I get this stuff. They are giving you a badge, and they have a list of what you need to do to get the badge. And it is a little goofy, right? Personally, I'm not that excited about every congregation getting a badge, but badges can be fun because it sort of gives you a thing that you're doing with a whole bunch of people all over the country. And they're doing some organizing around that to help us get this done. And it's actually a badge with very easy requirements, as you'll see. So the first thing is they want us to commit as congregations. And I think you heard your minister just sort of do that. So you guys even check that box. They want us to participate collectively. You're all here, check that box. They want us to host or co-host 3 events between now and November. We'll come back and talk about that. And they want us to reach out to voters one-to-one, to have some direct voter contact. So not just talk to our friends, but actually talk to people that might not vote unless we talk to them, right? Hosting or co-hosting events, what does that mean? What does it look like? It's not that everybody has to do one thing all at once. You got to fill up the whole sanctuary. It doesn't all have to be stuff that's happening at church, and it certainly doesn't even have to be all things that are specifically about celebrating democracy. UU the Vote in Minnesota, we're having some gatherings the first Friday of every month. We'll do one this Friday night starting at 5 o'clock. And then we at 6, we talk from 5 to about 6:30. And then about 6:30, we show a movie. So it's First Friday Films Against Fascism, and it's the first Friday of every month. So if you want to tune into that, that'll be, it's online. It's not in what, that's all virtual. So you're in your PJs at home, checking in once a month. And UU the Vote National is doing some trainings for phone banking, for congregational organizing, other kinds of things. Common Cause here in Minnesota is doing some fantastic trainings around organizing as well. And those are gradually getting added to our website. So they will be on the MUUSJA website within the next week. We Choose Us Minnesota, the coalition that we're part of, is forming county research teams. And what that's about is that the counties are the most powerful governmental entity that nobody knows about, right? So your counties are the people who decide how to implement and carry out the Minnesota state laws around how to run an election. Now, we have terrific laws. We have a lot of transparency. Our statewide laws are great. And there is some wiggle room around the extent to which each county implements those competently. Ramsey County generally does very well. Washington County, may struggle sometimes. So what We Choose Us is doing is they're sending people to actually form a county team that will meet with the county election commissioners and have some conversation and just do some friendly research around, where are you putting those polling places? What are your accommodations for people with language disabilities or who speak other languages? What are your accommodations? You know, if you're in a building with a push plate for a wheelchair, does the push plate actually work? The rule is you have to have the push plate. The fact that the push plate might be broken on election day, as has in fact happened, you know, it doesn't always get counted. So those kinds of things. Other events, League of Women Voters, amazing group. Is anybody here part of the League? I belong to Bloomington League. You guys are part of the League. Sherry knows a little bit about the League. And so the League of Women Voters is a fabulous organization that is forming and presenting candidate forums all over the place. And whether or not that's something that you need, like in your own backyard, look at the next town over. They probably do, right? So those are nonpartisan candidate forums. They often also will be the group that initiates going into the high schools. Does anybody know what happened last year with the high school students? Anybody familiar with that rule? Go ahead. Bingo. Yeah, we have pre-registration. Yeah, well, so in 2023, one of the amazing advances for Minnesota's election laws is there's a brand new law that 16 and 17-year-old high school students can pre-register. So boom, they get registered while they're in high school, and on their 18th birthday, they are ready to vote. They're ready to go in. They might need to change an address, but they're ready to roll. What else can high school students do before they turn 18 to help with elections? They can volunteer and they can be paid junior election judges. So we want the high schools we know that if you get involved with organizing of any kind, really, you know, if you're like shutting down your college or if you're serving as an election judge, I've done both those things. And when you get involved in that way as a high school student, you have drunk that Kool-Aid for life. When you, right? People who are active as youth stay active on average. And people who don't, you know, I mean, you can become active with civic engagement, you know, at any age. But for that consistent commitment and learning, it's really great to kind of do what we can to get the high school kids involved. Lobby days, public forums for issue campaigns, those also count as events. So for example, one of the things that we're doing over at my congregation, which is First Universalist Church in Minneapolis, Jen Budd, who was an immigration agent at the border, who just wrote a book about the horrors that she experienced and why she stopped being an ICE agent, and is now an immigration rights activist. She is coming to speak at the Mayflower Church, a lovely UCC church in South Minneapolis, and First Universalist is co-sponsoring that and helping to pave her way. So that would be an example of another sort of pro-democracy event that's not explicitly about the election. We will be doing voter registration there, of course, because whatever is happening this year, we're doing voter registration. But you know, any events that you have done since January, the gun rights people might have been at the lobby day on the Hill for you know, gun safety. People went to Beacon Affordable Housing. People went to the reproductive rights. People will be going to Pride. People will be going to Outfront Lobby Day, right? There's a lot of stuff that happens. All of that organizing has to do with civic engagement and counts towards our badges as Good Trouble congregations. And then finally, September 17th, which is National Voter Registration Day, that's a day that I am hoping every single congregation across our state, all of the UUs, are going to be marching to the post office with our cards and letters and mailing them all, and also doing voter registration tabling. Front of the post office is a great place to do that. Because why? It's 3 days before our election begins. Election day in Minnesota is not November 5th. Election day in Minnesota is September 20th. That is the day that early voting and absentee voting begins in this state. And that's our target, right? We want everybody ready to vote on the 20th of September. So we're going to mail these cards on the 17th. They'll be in the mailboxes on the 20th of September. And that's when we start calling everybody that we mailed a card to. So cards, what cards? How are we going to make a difference for pluralism, independence, interdependence from a nonpartisan stance? Why should I bother with this nonsense in church? Why wouldn't I go out and knock every door for my preferred party, my preferred candidate? Good question. Now, if you are fighting for a preferred candidate and a preferred party, good on you, do that, right? But we cannot do that at church. We cannot do that as one strong body. And we can do things as a church, as a congregation, that are different and supplemental, complementary to what campaigns can do. I ran a couple of state level campaigns in 2018 and learned a lot. It was a great education. And one of the things that I learned in doing that is that homeowners in Minnesota, especially homeowners over the age of 55, which, you know, yeah, I'm not asking you to raise your hand. We vote at about 80%, right? We have a phenomenal voting rate of particularly white suburban over 55 homeowners in this state. So if you're knocking their doors and you're talking to them about voting, talk about preaching to the choir, right? Especially if there's only, you know, two really viable choices. So door knocking homeowners for a primary, if you're really gung-ho about one candidate and you don't want the other one, that's fine. But, you know, when it gets to the general election, we need to be reaching the people in Minnesota who do not already vote at 80% and have not already totally decided who they're voting for or whether they're going to vote at all, right? And that is generally people who live in apartment buildings. When you start to look at the apartment buildings around this state, that is a far more racially, economically, ethnically diverse group of people, and it tends to be much younger people. And the voting rate in those buildings is closer to 40%, right? Not so great. So what we are doing with the UUA is looking at historically underrepresented voters, the overlooked, hard to reach voters, sending factual, friendly, upbeat information, culturally relevant images and messages, and including personal, authentic, handwritten notes, little notes on the cards or letters. And we see that there's some research to look at how much impact that makes. And what we're seeing is that can boost voter turnout with these kind of lower information younger voters by, you know, in some cases as much as, you know, 5%, 8%, ridiculous numbers. If you can boost voter turnout by like 3%, that's phenomenal. So it is a technique that we know is effective. What the UUA is doing nationally is encouraging congregations to write postcards and send letters with either Reclaim Our Vote, the Center for Common Ground, which is contacting mostly Black voters in Georgia, or with Vote Forward, social campaigns, which are reaching younger voters and lower income voters in a bunch of different states. Minnesota is not on any of those maps. We do not count either with like the UUA list of key states, you know, or with any political analyst list, because what they're looking at primarily is the presidential election. And there is going to be tons of money and tons of effort and time pouring into turning out voters who may influence Congress nationally and the presidential election nationally. And we have some congregations, and we will probably run out of Minnesota voters at some point because this is really becoming popular. So we probably will be doing some of that work in Minnesota and helping Georgia and Pennsylvania, North Carolina and such, certainly Wisconsin. In my opinion, we need to put on our own mask, oxygen mask first. These are the national campaigns, Vote Forward, Center for Common Ground. They are great. They have done really good work, and they're sending hundreds of thousands of pieces of mail to these targeted communities. If you do choose, by the way, to work with Vote Forward, be very careful to make sure that you only do the social campaigns at church, not the political campaigns. They have some letters that are targeted specifically to one party, and we cannot do that in church. In Minnesota, however, we became the Midwest refuge in 2023 for gender-affirming surgery and reproductive rights. We have people literally coming here as refugees because their autonomy, their right to own their own body, has been disenfranchised in their home states. The map that shows us as one of the few states with, that still honors women and people with wombs, depends upon the map of who is in our legislature. And as much as we may be sending, 2 senators who are both pro-choice to Washington, only half of our congressional team is pro-choice anymore. And in our state legislature, our pro-choice majority is hanging, as I mentioned, on 5 votes in the House. And right now, it's absolutely 50-50. It's a wash in the Senate at the moment. So our status as a refuge state depends upon holding the Minnesota legislature for climate conscious, pro-choice, gender affirming voices. And we could lose that. We could look like Iowa overnight. I do not want to wake up on the 6th of November looking like Iowa. I lived in Iowa for 5 years. It's a great state, but their politics right now are depressing. So what we're going to do, Minnesota, to remain a refuge, we're going to reach 150,000 young renters in 15 rapidly growing, rapidly diversifying areas of the state. We're sending 70,000 postcards. And if I can get the money, we may double that because it's kind of a popular concept. But this is an example. I've got some postcard packets here to show you what that's going to look like. And the towns that we have specifically targeted are these. Just for example, these are the ones for starters. So these are the towns where we can make the most difference. We've identified 337 apartment buildings, purchased the address labels for every door in those buildings. So we're contacting, every single renter in buildings, not the under 55 buildings in those districts. And we will be, really kind of sending them a note indicating the urgency and inviting them to help us choose who gets to make the rules for Minnesota. And then we will follow those notes by phoning every person in that same building. And we'll be on the phone going, hey, I'm Karen. I'm one of those people who, did you get my postcard? I sent postcards to your building. I hope you got it. And I just want to make sure you have everything you need to be ready to vote. Do you need a ride to the polls? Do you need any other kind of sorts of information? You want to know who your candidates are? You go to Vote 411. That's the League of Women Voters website. It's brilliant. It tells all about the candidates in a totally nonpartisan way. And so we will be making friendly calls. I've done that repeatedly. And you will get some disgruntled people. Where'd you get my number? Click. I don't want to talk to you. I hate politics. I'm never going to vote. You know, you get some of those. And then you also get, oh my goodness, I've never had a call like this before. Thank you so much for calling me. I just moved into this building. I wasn't sure where to go vote or how to find out. I really appreciate you. And I promise you, in the call, I have made thousands of calls like this. And it comes out about 50-50. Probably about 80% of the time you don't reach anybody. You're leaving a voicemail or sending them a little text. But of that other 20% that actually pick up, it's about half and half. People that are really appreciative and people that are just crabby. Crabby is useful because we can put that in our database and now we know who not to call next time. It's a good thing. Okay, we're mailing postcards September 17th. Talk about that. This is kind of an expensive project. It is going to run, if we run the full run, it'll be about $48,000, 32 cents per voter, which is, and a typical campaign is going to be spending anywhere from $2 to $8 per voter. So this is like a really cheap way to reach people, partly because I'm a volunteer. So I'm donating my full time. I'm a pediatric psychologist. I put my practice on hold until November, and I am doing this like full time for free. So that's a privilege to be able to do that. We have congregational coordinators, Priscilla Morton, who is donating her time to be able to kind of be the lead coordinator. She cannot do this alone. She's going to need a couple of other people to kind of distribute materials, you know, during social hours and bring them back in and all that kind of thing. So Priscilla needs to kind of build a team from just a couple other folks. And then MUUSJA is donating our media and you know, and a little bit of our staff time. MUUSJA, of course, we can't afford to donate all of our staff time, but a bit of it. How are we paying for it? I've raised about half that cost already, and I'm writing a bunch of grants, and we're also looking for donations. If you can donate to support this project, one roll of postcards, 100 postcards, it's $53, right? So this is a QR code for MUUSJA. This sign will be on a table in your social hall. And if you are donating specifically, you can click the link and said, I'd like to make this contribution in honor of you, the vote. Right? That's how to do that. We know we can do it. We did it before. We sent hundreds of thousands of cards in 2022. And we sent a few thousand in 2020. So we've had a lot of practice with this. It can be, there's a lot of ways to do this. Like people take packets home and, you know, do some writing, you know, on your own. People get together with their own friends. In addition to the UU congregations, by the way, we have Twin Cities Indivisible, Cannon Falls Indivisible, Mankato Indivisible, and the Minnesota Freedom Fund have also adopted this same project and are helping to fund it. What we're hoping is that because this is a project we work on in church, it's not just about a bunch of postcards. It's about us. It's about our community, something that we are doing together as a team. And so when people are writing little messages on the postcards, just 3 or 4 words, it says, I care about who makes the rules for, you know, tenants' rights and affordable housing, climate justice, immigrants in Minnesota, whatever, you know, you making sure, free lunch for kids, making sure that everybody is fed, safer gun laws, right? It's whatever it is that is really the closest thing in your heart is fine to send out there, particularly if you think it's going to land well with young renters, right? That's who you're talking to. But the idea is that the UU, the vote, is not sort of a thing that like 10 people in the congregation are doing and everybody else is doing this other stuff. It's like all the other stuff depends upon who is in our legislature. And we saw that last year. So Almost done. We ran the numbers for Unity. Now the UUA thinks these numbers are all these aspirational. What they have on file for y'all, in case you want to know, is 842 active members. I don't know whether that is actually current or not. This is aspirational. You can change those numbers if that's not accurate. That's what's on the website. So 842 members. But what that boils down to is when you take it down to 5% participating, it means 42 people need to show up for any event, 42 total between now and November. I think, I haven't counted, but I think you're like more than halfway there in this room, right? So you're fine. 3 events. I want you to be thinking about what you can do on the 17th of September, right? Talk with Priscilla about that. I can talk with you guys about that as well, and we'll figure out a thing, right? Maybe that's everybody gathers at a park 5 blocks from the post office, and we, have a march with signs or something like that. I don't know, whatever. Another event that you're already committed to is like Youth Pride. You do your pies for for Youth Pride. You can come on over and help to staff the MUUSJA booth at Twin Cities Pride. That would be super awesome. We really need more help with that. Those are all great opportunities, and there'll be all the kind of other stuff, that like we talked about with all the events. Is anybody here already an election judge? All right. Oh my gosh. Okay, 1, 2, 3, 4. So you have 4 election judges just in this room at this time. So check that box, right? You win. You're like, in terms of these organizing goals and getting the congregation together to do stuff, you got that covered. You're already there. So the only thing left is the voter contact goals and outreach to voters. Now, if we say we want to set a goal of 20 voters contacted by each of these theoretical 842 congregational members, that my calculator says is 16,800 voters. That can feel like a daunting number. That's a big number, 16,800. So when you break that down and say, we're going to send 16,800 cards or letters to voters in Minnesota, or maybe to these voters in Georgia, Pennsylvania. If I run out of addresses, then we're going to do other states. And then we're going to follow that up and call 16,800 people as like, no, we can't do that. But yeah, what that boils down to is if you start with even just 42 active participants, everybody else is off, I don't know, gazing at trees. But 42 people are like, I'm going to save democracy. That's 400 calls, 400 cards and calls per person over the course of 6 months, which is 2 cards and 2 calls per day between now and November, right? So you start to boil that down. You're probably going to have more people than that. You might or might not, hit that goal. You might or might not really have 842 people. I don't know. A lot of us don't. But that's kind of how we work out the math. And then we're all at the Good Trouble congregation party because we have made some serious good trouble. We've done some serious outreach over this summer. So these are the aspirational goals. And the thing is, this is like, there is no failure. There is no failure. You know that song? What a time to be alive. What a time to be alive. The revolution has begun. When we show up, we've already won. We've already won, right? You're here, you have already won. What we are doing is creating a community, creating a network within which failure is impossible. And no matter what happens in November, we are going to have each other in Minnesota. And hopefully we're going to have the state and have our legislature. All right. You all are incredibly patient. Thank you. Questions, comments? Yeah. Oh, I'm sorry. Oh, great. We've got another. Yeah, you have our other microphone.
I participated in the postcard campaigns before, and I'm just wondering what kind of evidence you have that to show that they're effective.
Specifically within Minnesota, so where the evidence comes from is there's I actually have a phone call next week with an organization called the Analyst Institute. And what they do is they have run randomized controlled trials looking at sending postcards out, sort of to demographically randomized groups. There was a study done here in Minnesota around that in 2017, and then more recently in Georgia and California and North Carolina. And so they're looking at the basically rate at which people vote who received the postcard, and then the rate at which people vote who didn't. And what they're showing is that the postcards will boost voter turnout by a small amount. I don't remember exactly, so it's something like 3 to 4%. A postcard followed by a phone call to that same person that got the postcard was voting, it had a boost between 5 and 8%. So really, and particularly if there was like a handwritten note on that card. So it is now, so that direct mail, the postcards, and especially the get out the vote nonpartisan postcards are more effective than something that you get with a candidate's face and name on it. And more effective than anything but someone directly knocking on your door, right? So the best thing is still door knocking. The second best thing is a conversation where you actually can talk to the person on the phone, but that's diminishing because of cell phones. People don't pick up the phone. You can see immediately who it is that's calling, and that's become harder and harder and harder to do. So that direct mail, particularly with a handwritten note, has some solid evidence behind its efficacy.
Has solid evidence showing that it gets out the vote more.
Right.
Do we have any evidence about what people look for when they vote?
Yeah, the way that people strategize around that is when we worry about it, like how many people are going to get this card and they're going to be like, no, I hate all those things that it says on this card. I'm going to go vote against it all, right? Is somebody going to do that? You betcha. I mean, that'll happen. But what happened, the way that we can sort of think about that in nonpartisan spaces and try to identify people who are more likely to vote in a climate conscious pro-choice direction, for example, and at least hold those values, is to look at the demographics and to target where we send the cards to. So they're not just kind of going out at random. That's why, for example, we had to purchase the address list rather than just being able to, randomly use the post office list, right? Because I'm really interested in having these cards land in particular apartment buildings in particular districts. And the American Community Survey over at Wilder Center, this incredible research center here in St. Paul. One of the things that we have now is the ability to actually map at a census tract and precinct level the precise demographics of particular districts. So we know that these cards are going into into districts that are more ethnically and racially diverse, and where the mean age is younger, and the buildings that it's younger voters. And what we're seeing statistically over the years is that it has tended to be younger voters and more racially and ethnically diverse voters who are less likely to be choosing authoritarian candidates. So this election is weird. I mean, I was just listening to the radio and they were saying that there are some changes in how older voters are leaning. So we may, it's, you rethink your political strategy as time goes by and as you get more information. So we'll keep an eye on that. But yeah, does that answer your question, or is there, yeah, thanks.
I just want to say.
Hold on. Hold on.
Oh,
The
yeah,
folks at home won't hear you if you don't talk into the mic.
yes. We should say.
I just want to say I've done letter writing with Vote Forward, which is one of the organizations up there. First in 2020 and then in 2022, and I'm doing it this year again. And it's letter writing. I didn't know about the following up with a phone call. That's cool. But I just wanted to say they do a lot of research every cycle, and they see that, yeah, it's a small percentage, but in close districts, like in swing states like Georgia, for example, it matters. And that, so it, it's not a gigantic bump, but it makes a difference. Absolutely.
Yeah.
Thank you. Is MUUSJA developing any materials for UU congregations to use within their religious education program to pre-register eligible high school students who are participating in church activities?
Now we are. You betcha. Yeah, that's great. And if there's what's fun is that actually somebody just asked that question in the UU the Vote Slack. So UU the Vote nationally, if you do Slack, they have it's a communication thing that's sort of halfway between Facebook and email. It's hard to explain, but there, if you're on Slack, there is this conversation there. There's a Facebook page. If you're on Facebook, you should definitely like the UU the Vote Facebook page, as well as like MUUSJA. So people are talking about kind of creating this, and people who are professional religious educators are actually building some of those. Jenny Thomas, who was with the Minneapolis League of Women Voters for many years, and myself had put together a curriculum that was just a one-day thing. And we used to teach all of our, I think it was fifth graders, like every year, the fifth graders would have a day all about voting, and they would make these wonderful signs and post voting signs all over the church. And it was super fun. But yes, indeed, this year we need to do that outreach to the high schoolers. Thank you for that. Yeah.
Thank you. I'm wondering if following up the postcard with a text would do?
Yes, it would be. So when we talk about texting, what we will be doing is giving people the option of either making a phone call or sending a personal text, sending a text to that same number from your own phone. We will not in Minnesota have the capacity to do like turbo text, the big fast text database. It's super cool. We're hoping that the UUA can do that again, but it's 10 cents per text. And so it's super, super expensive. And we're not gonna be able to come close to that. But yes, no, texting is great. And you're more likely to actually reach a person. And you can have, when we were texting Texas voters in 2022, I mean, we had some deeply meaningful personal conversations with those voters. I had a long conversation with a woman who was home bedridden. She had cancer, and she thought that she would not be able to vote. I said, I said, hey, hold on a second, let me just look something up. And, and I'm like, did you know that you can call, so-and-so, this is your precinct, you call this number, and they can bring you a ballot and you can vote. Even in Texas, they had that rule. And she was able to vote. And she held on to my phone number, because I don't mask my phone number because I don't care. It's like, I just shut it off when I go to sleep so nobody, creeps call me. I've had like 3 creepy calls, in hundreds and hundreds. Most people just don't bother. So, but this woman texted me back several days later, and she had voted, and I'm like, I cried, right? She said, I think this is the last election I'm ever going to be able to vote in. So yeah, it's personal. It's always personal.
I helped with the postcards last time. Happy to do it again, but I do have a question about it. I think this time is challenging for many reasons, but one is because there are a lot of people who really aren't happy with either of the presidential candidates and may underappreciate how many other important races there are to vote in. Is there anything about the way the postcards are worded or designed that would help people understand this is about more than one race?
Well, I can show you the postcards. Let me just, and yes. We'll just cannibalize a pack and sort of share some of these around. So this is what it actually looks like. Do you want to just help me pass some of those out? Yeah. Oh, yes, right, I forgot. Thank you, anyone online, for being here online.
Can you tell them how they might see the postcard? Can they find it on your website?
Yeah, you bet. It actually, that's. Yep, and I can share, I'll make sure to send the slides. They are accessible from MUUSJA's website, but I can send them. There we go, MUUSJA.org, yes. And we have a picture of the postcard that we can kind of put up that's online, or that's in the slides. So we'll share that. How this will work logistically, just to comment, is something that Priscilla and the postcarding team. First of all, actually, let me just ask this: is there anybody here right now who would be willing to just help coordinate with Priscilla to be able to? And I think what's going to be involved, or what most congregations are doing, is having a table, at every social hour or every other social hour, where people can kind of pick up a packet of postcards, take them home, write them, and then return them. Or if they want to, sort of sit at a social hall table and chat with your friends and write postcards while you're chatting, and then hand them back. So they all need to come back to the church so that we have the whole box and we can, check and get them ready. If you're able to put stamps on, brilliant. If you can't, just bring them back anyway. We'll figure out how to get them stamped. It's only money. That was a joke. Then as we get them back, and then the only other thing is sort of thinking about maybe planning some kind of shindig for National Voter Registration Day on the 17th of September, which is a Tuesday. Let me see if I can get back here to this year's post. There it is. Back here. So this is what, for folks online, this is what this year's postcard looks like. Yeah. So, yeah.
I'd like to inject a note of caution that you've drawn a distinction between things being partisan and nonpartisan. And I think it's actually impossible to be nonpartisan. I think that each of us comes with our biases and our leanings. And I notice that there's maybe 1 out of every 3,000 words in here is not neutral, that it actually has a political flavor and a leaning in it. And so I think we're in really dangerous territory to be saying that we're trying to just get out a nonpartisan vote. I think it's just not true. I think that that UUism is progressive, and I at least and maybe I can't even say that. Maybe UUism isn't progressive, but there's very clearly a political agenda when one seeks to identify demographics to whom to speak.
Mm-hmm.
And so just this strategizing of saying we want to send out postcards to a certain neighborhood or a certain kind of people that is being discriminatory and choosing to pigeonhole people. And so I think that's a really dangerous thing that we have to do with a lot of caution and really question whether we're being as neutral and nonpartisan as we're aiming to be.
That's a marvelous question. Thank you. And to that, I would say that Minnesota has actually a multiplicity of political parties. We have the Green Party, we have the National Marijuana Party, we have the Democratic Socialists, and we have the sort of liberal Democrats, and we have the progressive Democrats, and we have the Republicans. And there are still some independent and libertarians out there, even though they may not be enough to be on the ballot right now. So for one, there are many parties. And within those parties, there are many candidates. And when I use the word nonpartisan, what I mean by that, and what we must mean by that legally, right, and I think ethically as well, is that we are not using our church to further any one of those parties that I just named, many of which share certain values and some of which do not. We are not using our church or our congregation or our money or our time to further the campaign of any individual candidate or to wreck the campaign of any individual candidate. What we can do, and what is in fact nonpartisan, is to be very clear about what our shared values are as Unitarian Universalists. We don't all have to think alike to love alike, but if we don't love alike, I don't know what we're doing here. There are things that we stand for as congregations. There are affirmations of witness that we have passed. There are principles that we have approved as an association of congregations. And there are values that we probably are about to approve at GA this year as an association of congregations. Those are the values that are lifted up in the postcards that MUUSJA is sending out and in the congregational meetings that I'm sharing. You don't know from anything I've said whether I am somebody who votes Green Party, Democratic Socialist Alliance, or Democrats. Now, the odds are you can make a safe guess that I might not be a person who's voting for Republicans because sadly, you know, there is this polarization and much of it kind of embraces some of the issues that are really close to my heart, right? But I live in Bloomington. I live in the 3rd congressional district. I voted for a Republican, Jim Ramstad, because I'm a psychologist. And he was someone who, even though I didn't agree with him about how small government should be, he was brilliant on mental health issues. He was the best friend of Paul Wellstone, with whom I will, full disclosure, say that I personally agreed more of the time than I probably agreed with Jim. But so, you know, but if I were standing here today and Paul were still alive and running, I would not be naming his name, you know, and if Jim were still in the legislature, I would not be naming his name. So this is the difference. That's a very important point that you're making. And it's also really important to understand that you are safe at church or safe in your congregations, thinking about and talking about the values that are at play, even though, sad to say, there is so much polarization these days that, you know, one word out of your mouth about what you value and people are probably going to peg you for a party. Keep in mind there are more than 2 parties. That's one way out of that problem. Okay. Other questions, comments, input? Otherwise, you guys have been more than patient. And I think we probably should call it a night. And if anybody is just like super jazzed, like I need my postcards right now, you know, we do have some, but otherwise, what I would like you to do is to really seriously think about, you know, can you take a shift? Can you take a shift for the revolution, as my friend Ashley says? You know, can you take a shift to save our state as a refuge in the upper Midwest. And just be the table person at one social hour on one Sunday between now and November. That makes you part of Priscilla's team, and she will be, following up, I'm sure. She's wonderful. Yeah. Yeah. Yep. Yes. Nobody can do this alone. I am about to live in my car for a week. I'm going to, let's see, where am I going? St. Cloud, Brainerd, Underwood, Bemidji, Itasca, and maybe Duluth in Virginia before I come back home to Dakota. And then I got to go down to Winona and Rochester. So yeah. Yes. Oh, I'm sorry.
Thank you.
Mike? Yeah.
Sorry, not to cut across a nonpartisan thesis presentation at all. I was just curious if there were any specific points of success in the legislator in this last session, one or two of them that you thought were particularly noteworthy just to celebrate and sort of have optimism thereabouts at all. Just
were there some
anything,
legislative wins in this last session?
yeah, or just anything that you thought is something that is worth being proud of as a Minnesotan.
Oh, wow. Yeah. I mean, one huge one involves the changes that we, the additions that we made to our already super solid election system, right? So the pre-registration of 16 and 17-year-olds, restore the vote to people who are out of prison. Yay. All right. We had this, which allows people who are, coming off papers to be able to vote. We had we didn't get all the gun safety gun safety policies that some folks were working for, but there were some new laws around gun safety that sort of makes it a little bit safer in this state. We had new rules about bodily autonomy. People who can make their own choices about whether to have a child or not have a child, and how to raise that child when they do have one. So multiple things that happened that I think respect the humanity and the dignity of people's choices. Was there one that you had in mind that you were especially excited about? You just was.
But the current, I guess the Supreme Court or something is actually saying, oh,
Or so some of the marijuana laws, yeah, and that it was certainly some of the movement towards decriminalizing marijuana, I think, was something that had huge impact not only on people with some health conditions, but also because the criminalization of marijuana was so racialized. Yeah.
I'm sorry, we have one comment from the Zoom audience. Can
yeah.
you repeat what you want us to contact Erin Murphy about, please?
Oh, yes, thank you. Yeah. So Erin Murphy, what we're contacting Erin about is it's called the North Star Act, but more broadly, we're trying to ask Erin to do whatever she can to protect and side with immigrants in Minnesota as good neighbors and essential workers, because in case you have missed this somehow, they are getting a huge number of really bigoted, xenophobic, super hateful calls, calling immigrants all kinds of names and really just bashing particularly Black and brown immigrants. And it's just really ugly and bad. And so we're actually just asking Erin to do what she can to push back against that. And she will have a number of legislative choices coming up that she'll be able to discern, but she really needs to hear from everybody, especially anybody in the suburbs and greater Minnesota, that they do not share the anti-immigrant sentiments. We have a presidential candidate the other day said, immigrants are a poison in the blood of America. Right? That is language, I kid you not, that was used by Hitler. And, you know, it's not okay for people to talk like that. I don't care what the rest of their politics are. It's not okay for people to talk like that about other humans. So yes, please do call Erin about that. Thank you.
One more time, say the name.
Oh, it's called the North Star Act. Yeah. She's now the lead, she's the leader of the Senate. So she's like, yeah, and we're contacting her right now as in her role as the Senate leader. Yeah. The alpha person in the that's it, you know. So it's funny to think of little Erin with politics of joy jumping up and down being the alpha person in the Senate, but that's who she is now. So yeah. Okay. Thank you so much. I'm gonna let everybody go. So